Let's see what this does. Oops. Should definitely not be on that account.
Okay.
Yo, okay, I think we're live. I think we're here. 6:59, just on time.
Just on time too.
Bam. Just as the phone. Switch it over to 7.
Bam!
And let me jump onto the actual YouTube just to confirm you can hear us and whatnot.
Checking.
Okay, that's looking all pretty good. That one's okay. Can see that there. All right, sweet.
You hear us right? Let's do it. Yep. Let's rock and roll. Hey.
Yo!
Oh, man, Mere Mortalites. Welcome back to another edition of the Mere Mortals podcast. We've got Musings today, and it's a little bit of a delayed start there. Why? Man, I'm tired. I'm tired.
I think we're both tired.
We had a huge weekend. We've had a lot of stuff. Been celebrating Current's birthday. But we're back at it. We're a live session on a Sunday night, 7 p.m. here in Brisbane time.
Yes. Speaking of birthdays.
Speaking of birthdays, yeah, we're going to talk about years. Because I proposed, there was 2 different things I proposed to Karen to talk about. And we landed on this one, which was basically a what if, or how would life change, basically. My question was, and Mere Mortalites at home, you can play at home as well if you want to join in. How would life change if life expectancy all of a sudden was now 500 years? Mm-hmm. So I'm imagining right now, so to give you a direct example, let's imagine that we as humanity, as it stands, again, a witch has granted some sort of powers to the whole world. The witch comes in again, and she goes, boop, I've just, modified your genes, or your telomeres and everything else.
Yes.
And now they last for 500 years. That's the average age expectancy.
Yeah.
With the existing science that exists today.
Yes.
That's what it is. Bam. So if you're 80, you're living to 500 potentially. If you're 20, you're living to 500. That's like the average.
Yeah.
But again, it's not like, you can't die. You can definitely die still by cancer. You can still die by other means. You can get hit by a car, all of that. It's just that you can live towards 500.
The normal stuff
but
that takes you out.
Normally the question that comes up here is, does that mean that you're going to be like teenager form until you're 80 and then you're old when you're like 180?
Yes.
No. So what I want to talk about here is life expectancy goes to 500 years, but it's the exact same aging process that we would expect as of right now. So, if at 120 years you're pretty decrepit, perhaps at 300 years you're like, you can't even move.
Like you're all jacked up, yeah.
But you're still alive, I guess.
Technically alive.
To that sort of point, I guess. Like your heart's still beating, your brain is still operating to a certain fashion, but perhaps to like a really amoeba level like form, perhaps. Right? So I want to kind of discuss that.
Yeah, okay.
So let's imagine that, life expectancy is 500. You're not deteriorating to the point that you're like basically a vegetable at 180 or something like that. No, it's still like forms. You can still, operate as a human, but...
So would that even mean that there could be humans getting to, 700 and life expectancy is 500?
Let's go plus or minus 10% at 500. Okay. So like 700 is like telomeres won't get there. Like you'll run out of basically like DNA at that point.
So then get to like maybe 550, but...
Yeah, that'll be like the extremes, but not, we're not talking like, we're going to double it to 1,000. No, it's like 500-ish. Yeah. And so I wanted to probably get specific on more around what are the things that would change in life. Mm-hmm. What are the things that would stay the same?
Yep.
So I'm gonna go straight up. I'm gonna give you something that would change, maybe a little bit different. Euthanasia. Ooh. I think that for me, in that space in the world, I reckon euthanasia would become all of a sudden a thing that's expected in every single place if age expectancy got out that far.
Okay.
And I don't know, this one sort of come up like left field when I was talking to him, because actually I was talking to Dad about this. And he was more putting a term around like, when you get to like 70 or 80, if you get to some point where you're like completely debilitated, but something where they say like, your life's going to end in 2 years. It was a conversation of, okay, do you then try and do something to extend life if it's really terrible? Or is it like, okay, no, just enjoy 2 years? And it just made me think more like, okay, imagine you get to 180 years and let's say both your legs just all of a sudden stop working because maybe you took an injury at 150 and it's just not working. And maybe your arm's starting to get pins and needles from sleeping or something else. So you're not quadriplegic, but you're almost quadriplegic. And so your state of life is like basically you're at home being fed like through a tube. Now you could live now for another 300 years in this state. I think at that point, the conversation of euthanasia would probably be more explored much easier than it would not be right now.
For sure. That feels like one of the ones where it's forced ethical decision making, as in we've never really had to deal with it. And then now that we've got this problem, oh crap, we need to deal with this and actually figure out, okay, in general for humanity, what's what.
Yeah, because I think
same with sort of like cars and artificial AI cars driving, self-driving cars. And then, should they plow into the crowd or into the lady with the two young children?
Or blow itself up. Yeah. Kill the person who's driving.
Or something like that. Yeah. So, lots of interesting questions there. Would you feel that we would become more accepting of euthanasia, as in like on a whole, if you brought up the topic of euthanasia, it'd be like, oh yeah, my great grandmother was euthanized like the other day, where she chose to end her own life. Do you feel that would become more prevalent or accepted?
Yeah, like a conversation. I think it would be. I genuinely think it would be, because in such a state or such a world where I think the reason it's not discussed right now, it's like, oh, but you could have lived another 20 years, albeit maybe in pain, but you could live 20 years. But now you're not talking 20 years. You're talking like, oh, triple the life that you've lived. You could still keep on living in this state. They might go like, well, that's like unthinkable type of deal. No, of course you would go down that path. Yeah. That sort of mindset. But perhaps, I think you still have people, proponents fighting against that.
Okay. Liam asked a question: do you mentally decline at the same rate as well? So, we've discussed the body is sort of starting to go away.
Yeah. So let's just say at 120, you could. There might be some people who are.
So your IQ drops as you get older.
Yeah. So let's say it continues. So let's say it continues. Again, not to the point that you're like a vegetable. Not to the point that you drops like you can't understand anything. But maybe at like almost like trailing amount. So if let's just roughly for like 120, you're at 100 IQ points, right? Yeah. Let's say at 200, you're at 80 IQ points, and at 300, you're at 75 IQ points. Yeah. So it's not like you're going to go to zero and negative or some crazy stuff like that. Yeah. It's like you deteriorate, but maybe the deterioration like slows, but you're still going backwards and backwards.
Yeah, I'm already in the negative, so
you're already here. I'm high enough that I'll still be at 3,000 by the time I get to 500, so it's fine. But I think specifically, euthanasia for me, I was like, that point of conversation would change dramatically. I think that would happen really quickly, where you start to see people, say, probably every day now, people who are having conversations around, oh, should I live or not? If all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're going to live like this, not for 20 years, but for 400 years, you'd be like, oh yeah, no, like that's it. That's it. Some wouldn't, for sure. But I think more often with that extended period of life, you'd go, no. That's probably a step too far. Cool. Yeah. I've enjoyed life.
Yeah, I would have a feeling that euthanasia would become pretty acceptable. I would say there would still be some serious debates about it, but I reckon we'd get the laws down pretty loctite, because you're having to deal with it all the time now. So is this great grandmother being influenced by her, children or her children's children or children? Are they being unduly influenced by that? How do you prove that? All those sorts of like really ethical, sort of like gross, murky dilemmas of, is there money involved here? Is it purely a like emotional decision? Do they even have the capacity to make that decision? I think some other things would come into play that would also help make the euthanasia argument stronger, as in like, we'd need to do it for more space on the world, sort of thing. But I definitely think that it would become somewhat acceptable for sure.
The other one, so speaking about money, here's another one that sort of like came to my mind was compounding growth. So the money. So I went, man, there's some what makes, I was listening to this the other day, what makes Warren Buffett like such a great investor? And I can't remember the exact specifics, but I think he made 90% of all his money after 55, or maybe like 99% after 55, and then like 90% of his money after 65. Something like crazy like that. But he's been investing for like decades.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, it's the compounding growth of that over time. It's like, oh, okay, wow, after like 4 decades, 5 decades. Now this is crazy. And it made me think, man, imagine those humans who play the compounding growth game after like 400 years, and then it just become like silly. You're just gonna have these
total Futurama, man.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, Bender coming up and like
no. Fry put a
Fry
like a 0.25 cent. He had like 25 cents in an account,
an investment account, and like 1,000 years later,
yeah. And then he goes back and he's like, oh, remember, it's the same. It's like the same that it cost for a pizza from whatever that shop was. And then they had that elaborate ruse to get the number out of him. And he had billions or quadrillions or some shit. And it's just like...
So I would say that the compounding growth effect would be... So one, it would be crazy. Because you would have some humans who would probably stick around to like the 400, 500 year mark. And the conversation... Well, like, 2 parts. One would be, for me, like, what would you do with humans like that? Because they're going to have such growth at some of those later points in terms of their wealth, I guess, that it would be like almost accumulating like almost the entire net worth of the earth at that point, by a few individuals getting there first.
Yeah.
Or would it change the way people get taught about compounding growth? Like right now, people get kind of taught about it. They're like, oh, if you do this, it's a pretty sure way of like becoming rich or wealthy, so you can do whatever if you invest in this way. But I almost think even more life will change and be like, just freaking do this. Like by the time you're 200, you won't have to worry about anything else ever in your life. Type of deal.
I would have 2 problems with the assumption that there would be really, really, really rich people. And that would be, one, you need to have the mental fortitude to not touch it, you know, like it goes in that account and it stays in that account for 350 years. And then you cash it out when you're like 400.
400, yeah.
So that sort of thing, I think the vagaries of time would also cut into that. It's like, oh, I invested with this bank. Oh, good luck. That, name me a bank from 350 years ago.
Well, that's a good point, actually. Yeah.
And then the other one would be, I've been learning a little bit about really, really wealthy people recently. And one of the things they do is like, they don't have assets under their own names. So they don't keep, much like you've been telling me about the trust recently, where it's like, trust really doesn't protect you that much in terms of, you get a girlfriend, you're de facto relationship, and then you split up, and then she wants half of it. It's like it's not guaranteed to protect you, and that's much like a lot of the laws. So really, really rich people, even nowadays, don't physically own their assets. They rent it out to others or like put it under other people's names, and they sort of like live on this weird cash flow type of deal.
This weird like loan structure.
Yeah,
basically.
They're extremely rich, but own like you'll be rich and you'll own nothing, like, and you'll be happy, that sort of thing. So, I and then it's like, if you think about it, what is wealth? Well, wealth is like almost the economic output of what is happening. And because almost all the economic output is going to, at least the physical stuff, is going to be done by people aged 20 to 60. I have a feeling like those people would be like, oh, you're a quadrillionaire, but if I don't get these vegetables for you, you're going to die tomorrow, sort of thing. So I have a feeling that'd be like a bargaining tool of being like, I'm mobile. You better give me a shit ton of your wealth, or like, I'm not going to create that thing you want. I'm not going to drive you to this place, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
so
that's a good point.
I would imagine that even if those people got really wealthy, like the demand for that wealth to be spread, or maybe even it's like wealth is now measured in terms of like energy output in a day, like things moved in a day, or even like footsteps taken in a day, something like that, where it'd be something completely different.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, in a similar trend, I was just thinking in my mind, the things that would absolutely just break completely would be things like your superannuation structures, or government paying some sort of Centrelink to your retirees or stuff like that, because they're built on systems of expectation of, okay, we can pay for 30 years or 40 years of expectancy, right? And there's like a certain amount of investment. But imagine when they have to, okay, you have to pay for 400 years worth of, an older person's like life. It's like, oh yeah, you're going to easily just completely run out of money. I don't know. I didn't think about it too much, but I was just thinking, man, a lot of those structures would either break or we'd have to change it completely.
Yeah, for sure.
But the biggest one for me that I was like, oh, I reckon this would change for sure, is your approach to not so much retirement, but the way that you would structure your life in essence. So my thought was like, at the moment, I guess the way that we think about it is you grow up, you hit to about, you're a teenager, you get out of school, then you work basically in the traditional sense, 20 to 65, let's just say, right? Mm-hmm. Other people change it up, but you basically work for 45 years, you retire, and then you live in that retirement, and then you die, right? Now, in that period of 40 years, you amass some sort of wealth so that either you're supported by the government if you work in a particular, like in a country that does that, or you're pretty much like your self-wealth to be able to get you to the point of retirement and dying at some point. But if you're living to 500 years, okay, that changes because all of a sudden you're not able to blow the money either to get to like 100 years old and then die, or 110 or something. No, like you've got to plan it for another 300 plus years. And I almost think, I guess the question would be, how would the structure of like life change? And for me, I went, I think we would extend. So again, hitting like a 20-year hit to be an adult and then onwards. I almost think like the structure of life would change. So you do all the physical pursuits earlier. So all of a sudden you'd be like, maybe you might trend towards working less and going down the path of, I'm going to travel now. I'm going to do all my exercise. So I'm going to try and do a triathlon, a run, or all this riding towards the start of your life. Because you just know you're going to be around for so long that you'll maybe want to do all these things and you'll never be able to do them because you're so decrepit, basically. And then maybe we might begin full-time working at 40, 50, 60, something around that age where it's more, okay, you might be more desk-based, you're not moving around as much, although you still have your traditional like tradies, I guess. I don't know how the hell they'd sort of like operate after a long time, but maybe generally in the white-collar workers, you might begin that work later, like when you're 40, 50, 60, work for, and then here's a weird one, I reckon we'd work for like 80 years, 100 years, like a long time, like a very, very long time. And you'd be this old, not as movable, but you're much more desk-based type of worker, amass enough wealth then. So, I'm imagining 45 years and you amass a certain amount of wealth that you can live for another 40. With compounding growth, I'm assuming like, 100 years, and then you'd be able to live on that for 300 years or something to that effect. So I go, okay, I would imagine that would come. And then at 300 years, for the, what would we do after like 300 years? So one, for me, no fitness. Like you're not doing any running or anything. Like your body's like absolutely too cooked, especially if you want to live long. I think we would breed all these philosophers or scientists and stuff like that, because there'd be a lot of people who'd just be like, well, what am I going to do with 300 years worth of time? And I think you'd find a lot of people either go down the path of getting random degrees and becoming scientists, or all these other things that use a lot of mental acuity, or just philosophizing for like a long, long time, just because then you've been around for 200 years and you've seen like all this stuff, and it's like, oh, let me explain to you like this difference between this and that and a million other things. So I feel like that would be the breakdown of humanity.
I'm expecting a more dystopian type of future. So I'm personally imagining once you're beyond 200 years, you're not. I don't even think you'll be philosophizing. I think you'll sort of be done. There'll still be the instinctive human drive to survive and not want to die. I think that'll remain, but I don't think you'll be like interested in what's this new technology coming out? How is this going to revolutionize this thing? How should we think about this because this is happening? I think all those people would pretty much just be cooked. Definitely physically cooked. So one, I would imagine we would develop a lot of tech and a lot of energy related to just caring for those people, just keeping them alive. Yep. So, conveyor belt type, like here's your food coming to you on a thing. You probably wouldn't have actual like big mobility and locations and stuff. I imagine everyone's sort of like a pod type thing. You get in there and then, there's where I'm sort of thinking like metaverse type things. You spend all your time playing games or watching your favorite TV show or things like that. I just don't imagine.
Yeah, okay. More dystopian, like such an optimistic view of it.
Like, the robots coming in, it's all like steel, grey, or, blanket, sterile, white. There's no red, like, I'm imagining, like huge warehouses or like underground places because we don't have enough space up on the, for the earth and sunshine and stuff. So we bury them as deep as we can and like they're in just these huge things. yeah, so I'm imagining definitely more a dystopian thing, and then people would probably change a little bit their maybe recklessness when in their youth. So
Like more reckless.
You would I would
less reckless because you know you couldn't live for so long.
So like
if people are like life is short.
Yeah.
It's
Should I really be doing this one rep max deadlift
and break your back for 400 years?
Yeah. Opposite argument could be made. It's like you're fucked no matter what happens at 120. So do you really think is it really worth not doing these fun things because you're going to get an extra 30, 40 years of mobility? Like it won't
really
that much of a difference in the end. So
that's true.
Yeah, I could sort of see that either way.
Has Liam got a couple of questions?
Yeah, we've got a couple of things here, so we'll do a couple of comments and then maybe some Boostagrams, and then go on. So Peter said everyone would be like Gandalf, big hat and everything. I actually responded to that all the young people would do would be to make fancy wizard hats all day, every day.
Every day.
That's the economic utility of humans in the future. He also said it's called the Federal Reserve money printing and the Cantillon effect. Buffett is not a great investor, lol.
Correct,
The other thing is like he has access to opportunities that no one else gets because he's like...
Because now he does.
A bank is going out of business. Like, okay, I'll shore you up if you give me, a 10% discount on everything you own.
Yeah, and even then, like people like that or others, they could just call up a big corporation and be like, "Hey, I'd like to invest. Can you give me specific rights to like a better share than is available to the public?"
Yeah,
100%.
Sure. Yeah. So, Liam F says, "Do you touch on feeding and housing? Does it become sustainable, or do we just have mass favelas?" That's what I was saying. I'm thinking more not the favela in the dirtiness aspect, but definitely the mass aspect of like just a shit ton of human beings all packed together in maybe what you would say is suboptimal spacing and housing, what's good for mental health and whatnot. But
I've got an interesting point to this.
Nice. Peter also then says, I agree with Karen here. Growth can only sprout forth from death. Without death, the world would stagnate, slow down, and eventually ossify. Peter, my man.
He is on the money. I like it.
I hate the continual.
Well, I guess it's the fact that there is a shorter span of living that forces people to do more in the time. So one of the ones that I was going to talk about was like your people's patience would extend, but that would also mean that it would stagnate other things as well. Like
there's
no drive. Like there's no drive to get the best phone next week because like I got 300 years to wait for that. So like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's do a couple of Boostagrams and then we'll...
All right, let's jump in. Here's one from the man, Peter. He said, hold on. I've already read this one out from the March 6th, I believe. Yes, I know I did. That was from the interview with Sir Brian of London. No, it's going to be quick because we've only got the one from Peter.
At least it's Peter.
Yeah, March 10th. Peter says, Jerry, just remember, it's not a lie. If you believe it, George Costanza.
This guy.
2222 sat sent using
Thank you, Peter. The wise George Costanza.
The wise George Costanza. So that's the one for today for the
this is something I feel like I've missed out on a little bit because I just can't get into ones with the soundtrack, the laugh soundtrack on them. Like I just can't deal with them.
Like the background fake.
Yeah. So I feel like I've missed out because I didn't watch Seinfeld when I was younger. I know like bits and pieces.
A little bit, yeah.
But like I always loved the character of Kramer. Whenever I saw him, I thought he was a wild, crazy dude. But yeah, just in terms of like watching the full show. But yeah, that's
I did watch it actually. Now that I think back, I did watch it a lot with the fam. We did like Jerry Seinfeld. That was a good show
for sure.
It was the other one. What was the other one though? The one where they live. I think it's with Jerry as well. No, sorry. I'm getting this wrong. I didn't watch too much Jerry Seinfeld. I watched a lot of Everybody Loves Raymond.
Yes.
What's that guy's name? That guy's name is
Ray Romano.
Ray Romano. Yes. Dude, that guy is really good. I don't know if you've ever seen any interviews with Ray Romano. He's a cool dude.
Yeah,
cool dude.
I can't remember. All I can think of is like his high pitched like whiny voice.
Yeah. No, he's a cool dude.
Reminds me of Gilbert Sodfried. Shit, that's another
Siegfried?
dude. Gilbert something. Yeah, funny guy. Yeah.
That was 222 sat sent using Fountain.
Yeah, very much. Thank you for everyone who's wondering. And sad puppy Indeed. Only two sats this week. To be fair, I'm pretty sure I did see a couple of boosts come in that were they were like big. They were boosts, but with nothing attached to them. So yeah, someone boosted 1100. No name. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, we had that huge one the other week as well. But also, yeah, just streaming income as well, which is really nice. It's very gratifying.
Yeah, so I don't see the streaming coming through.
So we had probably about another couple thousand, which is really nice.
Cool, just from like streaming.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, which is super cool. So everyone who, if you're new to the Mere Mortals, you're wondering what the hell are you talking about? This is a value for value podcast. So we ask that you give back value that you have received from us. So we've been chatting for 24 minutes here. How much is 24 minutes worth of your time? Do you believe that it is worth nothing? Well, get your head sorted, mate, because it should not be worth nothing. And we ask, the show cannot continue on without you. Can't do this forever. It's not a charity podcast. This is a podcast for real life keepstakes, and I need to pay the rent. So sending in some Boostagrams helps. Go to newpodcastapps.com. Choose whichever one you like. I like Fountain. That's the one that Peter used as well. And yeah, send some stuff in. Get into the world of podcasting 2.0 as well. Some cool stuff going on there.
You want to be in there before it actually takes off in a few years.
100%.
So back to it. I think just wanted to touch more again on the patience bit, because the other bit I was going to talk about was perspective on patience and goal setting. Yep. I think that that would change dramatically in the sense that we would probably think what we might actually be able to do in 1 month, and we plan for 3 months, or we say you plan for 2 months and you get it done in 2 months or 3 months. I think you'd actually plan it for 12 months or something like that. Like you would slow down dramatically. I just think that...
you don't think that'd still be like the day-to-day worries though? You know, the day-to-day bullshit?
No, the day-to-day worries would still exist. So the day-to-day, like you still would have to like, I've got to cook per day and all that sort of stuff, and sleep per day. That doesn't change. But what would change would be, I think, dramatically I'm going to write a book. I can stretch that out. Like, is it okay if it takes me 3 years as opposed to a year? Or if I'm making a film, it might take a couple of months and 5 and or 2 years, something like that. So that becomes more acceptable. But one that someone called out, like I think Liam was saying, in my mind, the problem would be that, okay, let's imagine that you start living to 200 to 300 years old people. The time, not time lag, but the time increase in those years would change the perspective on what like time passing by would also be. So like there's no, like of course when you're 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old in your school, you're like, man, the days take ages. Jeez, like I'm still like one semester's taking forever. Like it's no surprise that when you become 20 years old, things start to go faster. You know, now that with starts to get to 30, it's like, oh man, a year, it's going so quickly. And it is this time lag as it gets longer, that time and time will seem like it is going quicker, because in the perspective of what you've lived, it's actually more of a sliver of time. So they've said, if there was to be a human who lived to infinity, like lived forever type of deal, the problem that would happen is as you get older, time would pass by quicker in your perspective views, to the point that if you actually lived to like 1 million years, to you, a lifetime with a person would be the perspective of like of a blink of an eye. So you would never make personal connections because everyone to you is just like flashing by. So even though in our state, like that doesn't really compute so much in our day to day. It's because our life is a particular perspective of length. But if you think about it, like if you got to 400 years old, what a year is to you then is completely different to like a kid who's like 10. So you would see that the year go by so much quicker than you would have back then. And it would just get quicker and quicker and quicker. So I think this sort of like time game, I guess, would cause you as you get older to probably become less and less connected to the world as well. You'd almost go like, things would just kind of flash you by and you'd be like, it's another birthday, it's another this, another that. And you'd probably be less inclined to celebrate. You'd be less inclined to participate in things. Like you would lose also any sense of newness as well. Like I could imagine a lot of new things would come in science, right? Like science would change and would be good. But, it's another book about this particular.
You'd get over it.
I actually think.
it's another recession, oh, it's another, world
This
changing
is coming,
event
yeah.
for this. And then it'd be like, oh, there's a new religion coming up. How nice. I've seen 6 of them.
Well, and that's what I'm like, it would be interesting to ask people who got to, say, 100 years old, 110 years old. Is it starting to get boring? Some people might say no. Maybe some would say yes. But even just double, like, we're talking 500, but even just double it, 200. Is it to the point that you'd almost see so much, it'd be like, actually, that's kind of it. I'm just bored now. Like, I've seen enough. I've done enough. There's nothing for me left to do. I'm just bored all the time doing whatever.
Yeah.
Because by the time you get to 400 years old, you might have exhausted, like, everything you've ever wanted to do. And you're kind of like, well, I've done it all. So that's it.
All right. So 2 things with that. There's, I'm going to say both of them in unison, even though they're not connected, so I don't forget. So one was, what do you think your memories would be like at 400? Because the newness factor could still be in there because you've basically forgotten everything. So, what would be like the core memories that you've retained? Would it be even stuff from your childhood, and also adding into the fact that your memories degrade as you get older? It's like it becomes hazier to remember. What exactly was the color of that house or the walls, or
I don't think you could remember that anymore. I don't think that you'd be specifically remembering anything like that.
Yeah, so I was more thinking like, what would the core memories be, and then would you have forgotten so much stuff that the newness could still be there? Like there is that newness factor still of, oh wow, like that was, we sent another rocket up somewhere, or someone created this amazing device. How cool is that? How amazing is that? And I've forgotten the second one in my whole explanation there. So
good.
But yeah, what do you think about the remembering things? Like what would be a core fact, like a core memory that would stay?
Yeah, I think you would remember things like right now. If we were trying to remember things from school, there's a few bits that probably would call out to each of us, like an event or an action that would take place. But if I had to like remember really a full day, I can kind of remember like specific things in a year at the moment. Like I would say, I remember like when this happened and that happened and this happened. But it's like maybe situated within a year. I guess I'd probably say to that. Or maybe even like a semester. Maybe you could break it down that way. I'm imagining multiply now us by like 10. So I would almost say that you would be remembering things by decades. Like you would go, oh, I remember that in that decade.
Okay. Yeah.
I went here.
It's an interesting concept.
Or like in that decade, I did go to Spain and I did go to USA and I did talk to a couple of people. So you would remember the key events that happened in a decade, as opposed to like the key events that happened in a year or in a semester. So I guess I'd see it that way. Gotcha. I reckon and with the deterioration, I think it would even get down to like, the top 3 things that happened in that decade, basically. So, it's weird, but if you look at it now, like from 20 years to 30 years old, obviously, it's hard to call it out, but whatever our top 3 things that happened this whole decade, that's probably all you could remember realistically into the future. Oh man, I remember like I did this massive travel to South America. I had a really good time in Japan, and like I started this thing like a podcast.
Yeah,
that might be like 3 things for you to be like, that's all I can remember.
Yeah,
nothing else.
The other point I did remember was, do you think that people would just become stuck in their ways and against change of any sort? So as you get older, like I've noticed in my dad, he gets more stubborn over some things. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like I prefer this way, even though it doesn't particularly make sense, or it might be like a new idea and he's just not giving it the time. Maybe it's because he's seen that in the past, but maybe. Would you think people would stagnate and get to a point where it's like, I like this food, I like these people, I like doing this, I'm not going to do anything else. I'm 250. I don't want to spend time something that I know I hate doing. Oh, but you haven't traveled in the last 150 years.
I don't care. I don't want it.
I know, and that's because I've done it before. I've tried it. I didn't like it. I know what I like. So do you think people would, like, I guess, stagnate to the point where they're just so resistant to any sort of change? I don't want to do anything else. I don't want to see this. I don't want to...
Yeah, I think people would. I think people, if we're already seeing it happen to people nowadays, I reckon it would be exacerbated even more for exactly that reason. Just people being like, I've done it. Like I've done this, I know what I'm
I
like.
figured it out.
Yeah. Like I figured out whatever.
I don't.
It's not like you have to figure out what life means, but you're like, I figured out exactly what I like, I don't like, and I don't want to do that, and that's it.
Yeah,
I
100%.
don't care what you tell me, I'm not going to do it. I guess the biggest question actually in Mama, there's two, but I'll leave the last one till final, was would people even live to 500 years? Right? So I'm said life expectancy is 500 years, give or take 10%, so 450 to 550. But would people even get there? Now, you said, oh, well, yeah, you have to build all these things to get people to live fully into that regard. But I kind of go, look, we had Spanish flu in 1919, 1920, whatever that was. We had COVID, right? Now, if you're young and healthy, awesome. But stuff like that, dude, that's going to absolutely eradicate any older person, especially when you're like down to, if you're 150 or something like that, I don't know how well you're recovering after like being immunocompromised like that to any extent. Let alone the statistical increase of you being killed by something else along the line. So sure, let's say you did get to 120 and you like normally you die of old age, like your heart gives out after a while. Now all of that, it gets extended to 500, but how many now more opportunities is there for you to get cancer, you to get like a blunt trauma, and at that point, like you're pretty frail. So like a hit or a fall, now that's like grave. Like you almost might be like, might as well just kill myself at this point. Yeah, not going to exist for another 200 years in a bed.
Yeah, well, that's why that's what I imagine. Like, if you wanted to get there, you would be bed bound. There would be no going out and doing things, exposure to the air or whatnot.
Well, that's right. And then I go like, do humans want to live that way? And so I went down two paths. I landed on two different scenarios in the world and see which one you reckon might happen more. I would go, even though life expectancy would be 500, we would see literally a handful of people live beyond 200 because just other people would just die out of like random selection, diseases, just choice. Like you'd be like, I don't want to live for another 200 years like that. You'd only have like those select few who are like already dedicated right now to living as long as possible and like living in a little echo chamber.
Or religious, sometimes it's like, it's against my religion to commit suicide.
I'm going to do all it takes. Yeah. So I think you'd see a handful of people go beyond there, but everyone else, like no one would go beyond that. So if the expectancy went that way, or we'd all figure out a way, metaverse style, where after 150 years, you kind of know that, their body's like completely just like gone, and you'd be put into some chamber basically where you're just connected by your brain into the metaverse type of thing, and you just live a new life in the metaverse. So your body's just like put into like a little capsule, and it's just fed through a tube, and you're forever connected into this new metaverse. So you almost have like two lives. You have the life of meat suit, and then you have the metaverse like life where now you live whatever you want for that amount of time. I almost went, I don't know which one's the more likely. What do you reckon would be the more likely in those two scenarios? Because one feels dystopian, the other one feels like completely like optimistic. Yeah.
I mean, it just depends how you frame it. I know plenty of people would say the metaverse is a dystopian thing. Matrix style. That's their definition of a dystopia. And that
others would think it's utopia.
Or and dying off sort of naturally and gracefully in a way somewhat is more, it's more natural, man. Like that's
more genuine.
It's part of nature's cycle and things like that. So which one would actually be more likely? I have a feeling that human ingenuity and our like grasping, blinding desire to stay alive would mean that we would go for the second one, no matter what the form. So I think humans can live through some pretty dark and deep and nasty times so they'll keep at it. Just to keep going, man. Like look at all those people in the gulags. Surely that would have been easier just to off yourself,
but you'll just stick around for like 8 years,
or just
9 years.
Not even off yourself, just stand outside for an extra 5 minutes and you'll probably die.
But they live through it to be like, no, I'm gonna get out of this.
Here's a fun one for you. How would we view the family structure? So what level of care would a child, a young boy have for his great grandfather? So who's, I don't know how many that is. Let's just say 180, maybe even to the 200s. And how much would that great grandfather
also have back to
his great grandson?
Again, let's do some rough maths, right? let's say your dad, until you have 2 kids. You've got 2 people to care for, like 2 people to share your love.
Yeah.
Now, say you're a grandfather. So like you say you got 2 plus, let's say another 2. So what do you got there? 8, right? So it just keeps going up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
2 to the power. So however many greats.
So let's go one more.
Yeah.
So what's that? 64?
Yeah. So it'll go like 2. You'll have like 2 sons, 4 grandsons, 8 great grandsons, 16 great great grandsons. Yeah, by the time you've got 3 greats in your name, you're already up to 32.
Yeah. So let's go a couple more. So then you got 64, 128. So roughly about. So 128.
Yeah.
Now Dunbar's number is 125. So and Dunbar's number is like the amount of people you can have in your network where you can genuinely know them. So at that point, you would know other people. Right?
It's even less beyond that, because then it's like you've still got your sons around.
Well, that's what I mean. You still got one bill. So like I think by the time you get to 200, you don't give a shit about like those people, and they don't give a shit about you, because like you're so removed. You might as well be a historical figure than like a connection. So I think the family structure would break a lot, would break like a substantial amount, or you would move towards a more segregated view of families. Like the family lineage would be even stronger. You know what I mean? Like you'd be like, oh yeah, these are the Downs, and it's a massive Downs line, and everyone knows because it was like this. You might not know them per se, because you don't really interact with them as much because they're like so removed. But you can be like, oh yeah, that's my lineage, and they were around when COVID happened, and now we're in Mars or some crazy stuff like that. So maybe I could see again. I'm not sure. I could be swayed either way of being like, do we just not even interact at that level, or does it become like huge dynasties of families of being like, oh, these are the particular family. I also think it doesn't happen so much now, but maybe it would happen then, that forming these dynasty families would become more important. Like you'd almost be like, you better keep on like continue this lineage, because like I know as a 200-year-old person, like, oh, I can still see that my lineage hasn't, like you haven't had a kid yet. Maybe there'd be some pushes would be like, no, I can see that my lineage should continue, and I've lived long enough to see that. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I would also, there's really interesting discussions about, would people still have kids if they knew like, geez, there's just so many people, like there's just so many people on this earth, even more than the current sort of, you have enough kids to sort of replace the people who are dying, which is roughly what's happening in the world now, apart from Africa and the developing nations, because they still have high enough child mortality rates and whatnot. But look at basically every Western country, and it's either just below replacement rate or it's slightly under it. So would people have kids? And then also it would be, I 100% agree that you'd not care about those people who were they connected to you, they came from you. But also, how would your choice of sexual selection be different? Because maybe it's now like, this is going to continue. Like if I make any mistakes here, this is going to continue going forward.
Time.
So is it better to just, freeze a bunch of my sperm and my eggs, and then,
be at that at 200?
Well, yeah, potentially, you've met someone and you're like, all right, let's just chill out, spend 30, 40 years to really get to know each other. And then maybe we can, have some kids from that or something.
Imagine the conversation, when it's like, when you were 18, I was 2 years old. It could be like, when I was 40, your dad was 2 or something like that.
Yeah. Or you've got a brother who's 100 and you're like 10 years old, and you've got a brother who's 230.
Yeah, something crazy like that.
Because your parents just decided like, no, we'll just decide, why not? Let's have another kid.
Man. All right, well, my final question to you here is, how long do you think you would want to live? So life expectancy is 500. Would you take it all up? Do you think you'd try your best to live to 500? Would you settle at a particular point? Would you change some of your thinking?
Yeah, I have no particular desire to live a life that I don't think is worth living. So there's nothing in me that would say, I need to continue this on. Like, I think I'd if I got enough stuff done, got through the normal years of like to 100 maybe. And then I sort of just started to see like, unless there was like, oh, this new technology is going to improve your life drastically in the next 5 years, 10 years, I would sort of probably be looking at, okay, how is my life really going? Like, if I was totally fine and intellectually speaking and getting great enjoyment out of life, and even if I was relatively immobile, I still had a rich inner world. Maybe. But I get the feeling like as soon as I started to degrade mentally,
you'd just be like, man.
I would hope that I would, and then it's also like, am I a drain on people? Am I a drain on the resources of this
That's
world?
what I was thinking about. Yeah, like we become a burden so much that you almost feel like terrible for it. Yeah, my thought process was like, I think maybe I'd mentally change. So like right now, I have a mindset. It's like, roughly life will be 80 to 90 years. Everything going well. I guess that might extend to like, okay, 150 years. So then plan accordingly to live to like 150 and what that may be. Because you could still be...
Start putting 25 cents in the bank.
Yeah. To 100 years later.
Purposefully forget about it, and then it's
and looking at 100 years later. So I think there'd be that aspect of like, okay, plan to
and
live
then
to
with
150.
inflation, it would probably be like...
Nothing.
a Googillion or some shit like that. So many zeros that if you could
break it,
put them all into like a single human brain, it would be so dense it would form a black hole and that sort of shit.
Fucking hell. So I think there'd be that planning to like 150, but there would be some decision made at 120, 130, 140 around that. Maybe if that idea of the metaverse looks like it's good enough that it's not a burden on society, and you're kind of like, it's like you're basically to your family being like, this is me dying and I'm moving on to like another place. Like you can't, like that's why I would actually say that, I don't know whether they do this, but I feel like it would almost need to be like an afterlife concept. Like not people who are alive can't go into this metaverse space.
Yeah.
Like you can't connect that sort of level. It should just be like, no, this person's like technically dying and moving on to this new life. I feel like it'd have to be that level, because there would be perhaps some feelings of like, I do remember my body back then and create that. It should be like, no, there's no body. Like this is just me now, just the mind.
Yeah.
So I would say that if like that move towards that and it was good enough, then perhaps I would be like, okay, let's experience that, as long as there would be the option, the possibility of also exiting out of that as well. So I think that would be like my game plan. I'd be like, okay. And some of my goals, I guess, would slow down a little bit as well. Like if I was like, I want to write a book or study this, I might be like, I'll study that next decade. That's fine. That's cool. Yeah. Like you'd slow down a lot. I think at least me personally, I'd be like, I'll slow down a lot.
Yeah. Hey,
that's my takes.
Sounds good.
Any more questions we got on there?
No. Peter said, guys, I'm late for work. Got a split for now. Peace out. Thank you, Peter. That's just what the Mere Mortals do. We make you late for work because it's such electrifying.
I just thought about it. It's interesting that us doing live podcasts and getting you to listen to the live podcast takes away from streaming Satoshi's tours.
Yeah, they're starting to.
I know that they are starting, so I guess we're getting ourselves prepared for that eventuality.
Yeah, and there is the possibility that, there was a big discussion this last week about, should we make it so that every comment, so like cross-app comments, so think of YouTube, the comment section is like the best thing about YouTube. Imagine that sort of section, but it's through any app, no matter what. Maybe each comment should be like a 1 sat payment to stop people spamming or something like that. I think there's a lot of creativity, so there'll be.
That's right. We've got a mindset of like we're going to do this for 200 years, so it's fine. We'll take the time. We'll take the time we need.
We'll be here. Don't worry. I won't off myself. If the Mere Mortals are still around in 200 years, 150 years time, I'm pretty sure I'd be like, fuck it. What's another 50?
What's another 50 years? Anything else from anyone?
No. Riven says viewer for life. So that means we've finally got some spammers coming in. So this is what those 1 sat payments would stop this sort of bullshit.
Good. All right. Well, we're going to leave it at that. Mere Mortalites, folks. Nothing else for our musings of living to 500 years. You let me know if you've listened to this after the live. If you would live all the way to 500 years, would you live less? All that's for sure is if you lived to 500 years, you make sure that you keep streaming and keep listening to the Mere Mortals podcast. By then would be around the 14,000th episode, something like that.
Jesus.
Something in that level. Who knows?
Yeah. We didn't even get onto like
monthly goals. We'd be doing like decade goals.
Yeah. We didn't even get onto like what would we celebrate? Like, would you even celebrate your 250th, or you'd just be like,
yeah, I feel like you'd stop
fuck
celebrating birthdays at that
yeah,
point.
you just celebrate meme days like 420, and you're like, fuck yeah.
That would be funny. That would be a funny birthday to celebrate if anyone made it that far. All right, Mere Mortalites, we're gonna cut it there. Again, if you haven't heard of podcasting 2.0 and being value for value enabled, we are value for value enabled. Karen already spoke a little bit of that around this on the Boostagram lounge.
Yep.
But again, just take a look at podcasting 2.0 apps out there. Again, Fountain, I'm going to recommend Fountain. If you haven't checked it out already, go and do that.
Yeah.
Mere Mortalites.
One last one.
Yes.
Mr. Onion Jr. says, living long is a scary concept to me, but I'd like to see the point of humanity where we're finally able to traverse and explore space. Yes. That would be
a cool thing.
And that would probably actually be one of the benefits almost of space travel. Like if you can everyone's still like, even if we got up to like 75% light speed, it's still a lifetime to get to the nearest planet. Where it's like,
no, it's a quarter of a life.
Yeah, maybe I would. Maybe I would. And especially if it was like the last part of it, and be like, yeah, fuck it, I'll take a bet on going into space, see what happens.
There you go.
So yes, agreed. Thank you, Mr. Onion Jr. We are ending off now though, so get into the live stream 7 p.m. on Sundays, Australian Eastern Standard Time. From
again, just want to wish you whatever you listened, whether it was live or afterwards. Hope you enjoy wherever you are in the world. Mere Mortalites, Juan out.
Kyron, old man out.
Good.
Good.